Today we're going to talk about what search advertising is and how to go about it. Okay, so let's start with the beginning. What is search advertising? Every time you go online and you conduct a search in a search engine, for example, most people use Google. That will be unsurprising, right? Roughly 80% of people using a computer use Google for all their searches, and roughly 90% of people do the same thing, meaning use Google on their smartphones. So based on that, I'm going to mostly talk about Google in this presentation because it's so ubiquitous, right? So every time you type in a search, right, what's going to happen is Google is going to provide two type of results. Okay, the first type of results are organic searches. Okay, and those are going to be basically the highest pages given the search that you have placed because of the content that it's on it. The second type of searches, which actually happen to show first higher in your result list, are ads that Google thinks are pretty close to what you're interested in. So the searches that have advertising behind it are going to show with a little ad word right before the search. And they're going to show at the top. Okay, and the ones that are organic, the first one will be usually the second or third result in your searches, but they will not have the little ad word beforehand. So that's how you know that they are organic, meaning they didn't pay to be there. They just are there based on their content. And what we're going to do today is try to get at understanding how can you get your results to show up as an ad. Yeah, so that's the goal today. Okay. Now we understand this idea. Let me get into why you should actually consider this. The answer is simple. Most people, whenever they do a search online, they are gonna click in the first few results that they find. Most people don't go through the search pages and look through 15, 30, 40 different links. Okay, people don't have that kind of time or interest. And because of that, they are going to go through the first few results. And because the first few results are ads, it will be probably a good strategic decision to consider having ads, given that most of the clicks in different websites happen through search, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss today how can you go about doing a search advertising campaign using the Google platform. Okay. Now, most of the concepts that I'm going to discuss apply to other platforms, like if you're interested in Microsoft, you can do the same thing in Bing, but given that their market share is so small, I'm going to focus on Google. Now, the first thing that you need to do is you need to create a Google Ads account, which is free, right? So if you already have a Google profile, you can just ask Google to link your profile with an ads account. If you have your own business and you want to create a new business account for Google, that will make sense. And then you can create a Google Ads account for it. Okay. That will be your first step. Then after that, you need to start thinking about strategically how you're going to go about doing advertising campaigns online, right? And what is important for you to understand is how Google goes about organizing the structure of the advertising campaigns. So for each Google Ads account that you have, and you can have multiple, so let's say that you have a company that has two aspects that are very different. One is a service and the other one is a set of products. You can have two Google Ads accounts, one for each of the different aspects of the business. Okay. Or you can do this by brand, right? Let's say you have 5 brands that are somewhere distinct. You might actually want to have a Google Ads account for each of those brands, right? And then for each of the brands, let's say, that you have an account for, you can create different campaigns. Now, ideally, if you're doing this with branding in mind, which probably smart thinking. These campaigns should basically be nested into the brand essence, right? What it is that you're trying to convey about your brand to their customer, right? Strategically, if you can do that, that will be smart. So these campaigns are basically going to be themes or specific goals that you're trying to achieve around that brand, right? I'm assuming you're organizing by a brand, okay? And then what you're going to do is you're going to create specific ads that are going to be basically nested within these campaigns, where the campaigns, like I was saying, hopefully they have a thematic aspect that mirrors or matches what you're trying to convey about your brand. Okay? And then what we're going to do, or what Google is going to do, it's going to create or enable you to select specific keywords, which we're going to discuss in a few slides, around which you're going to build specific ad copy, right? So you can have a ad that might actually have multiple variations on that ad, where, for example, the title that is displayed at the top of the ad, as you can see right here, might actually be slightly different, right? I'm going to show you more examples of that later. And those titles, hopefully, will be built around the keywords that you're using, okay? And like I said, then you might have slightly different versions of that, okay? So this idea of understanding how Google basically goes through the advertising structuring system, it's important because it's going to enable you to basically organize your ad campaigns in a way that it's going to be easier for you to know what needs to be modified and what needs to be managed. Now, once that you basically understand the structure and once that you decide that you're going to do an ad campaign, the first thing that you need to understand is how Google actually goes about creating these ads, of course, with your input, right? And there is going to be different elements that are basically required for you to actually have an ad, okay? And one of the pieces of the puzzle is what I'm going to call the advertising copy, right? This is basically the different text parts that are required for Google to create that ad that I've shown you in the beginning, okay? And the first piece on that is creating a headline, okay? Now this headline, instead of being a unique headline, what Google is going to do is going to give you an option of having 15 different headlines. And what Google is going to do is it's going to have slightly different options in those headlines. They are all supposed to be built based on the same keywords, so the headlines are going to be quite similar. On the other hand, by being slightly different, what's going to happen is Google is going to try to match the headline to the query or the intent of the query that the user has actually typed in the Google search engine. Okay. So if I say weight loss, right, or maybe diet weight loss or something like that, then what Google is going to do is going to look for which headline within all your set of, let's say, 15 headlines matches better to that query. And it's going to pick one of those and create instantaneously in a very small amount of time a new ad that it thinks based on your headline options, it's going to be the one that is going to match best to what this person that is searching at Google it's going to consider most useful, and because of that it's more likely to click on it. Now, these headlines are short. The maximum number of characters, that's not words, it's characters, is 25. Okay, good. That is the first part. The second part, and the way Google constructs these ads, is going to be a URL. This is an address on a website, as you well know. Okay. Now, the actual words that show in blue, typically, and so that the user knows they are a link, are not actually the address where your landing page is going to be. Okay, we typically call this display URL vanity URL, and you should actually build this based again, on the keywords. Okay, the keywords are going to be very important, or synonyms for the keywords, or slight variation on keywords, like we talked when we discussed SEO. Okay. And then you're going to have description, what it is that the user, or in this case, the visitor, is going to be able to do if they click on that page. So you might want to have a brief and clear description about what you can do for your customer. Again, 90 characters or less. So these are very short and concise. So spending time building this carefully, it's very important. Now, in all cases, all these three elements of your advertising copy should be built around keywords. Okay, so let me emphasize, if you start from the wrong keywords, your headlines, your URLs, and the descriptions are not going to be what the customer is interested in, and because of that, they are not going to click, and this is going to have a downstream effect of basically, A, Google will not show your ads, and B, maybe more importantly, if it shows your ads, people are not going to click on them. And C, if they click on them, they are not going to do what you want. They are not going to buy your product. They are not going to introduce the information in your sign-ups form, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so these keywords are absolutely essential. Now, let me remind you something we already discussed a little bit when we discussed SEO. There are different types of keywords. So when I say keywords, don't think about individual words. Okay. A series of words is considered a query, and most people call it a keyword in this industry, right? So if you're looking for dog food, like you have here in this case, what's going to happen is the keyword dog food, because a lot of people are going to input it in Google, it's going to be a keyword where a lot of people are going to compete for that, because it has a lot of searches, but it's not very specific. What kind of dog food are you interested in? So even though it has a huge search volume, it's not very actionable from a marketing perspective. So you want something that it's more narrow and unique, that is going to match as closely as possible to the product or service that you're going to offer. Okay, that's going to ensure two things for you. One is that you have less competition. The more specific your keyword is, the less people are going to be interested in that keyword typically, right? And because of that, you're going to have to pay less for that. We'll talk about that in a minute when we talk about the bidding process. And then not only that, but typically, because it's more specific, okay, and it's going to be descriptive of what your brand / product / service offers, right? You're going to have a higher likelihood that they will just continue through not only seeing the ad, but actually clicking on it and hopefully converting in whatever form or CTA you're interested in. Okay, so again, when you're picking your keywords, you're going to have to do some keyword and audit and keyword searches, right? But make sure that you have longer keywords enabling you to achieve two things. Hopefully be more specific, and because of that have higher conversion ratios, but two, also have less competition, and because of that have lower prices for your bids. Okay. Now, like I was discussing before, one of the key elements of your ad is going to be the URL that is displaying there. This does not have to be the address of your landing page. Okay, if you're smart, you can give your landing page the same URL as the one that you're displaying here in your ad. Okay, but sometimes because IT and marketing are not coordinated on this, maybe the person putting together a landing page is not the person putting together the campaign. So if that's the case, don't worry if they pick a name that is not appealing from a marketing perspective for the URL. You can put anything you want so long as it's rooted in your domain. Domain meaning what is the core website that your company has, right? So if this was an advertising for a Google product, like for example the Google Pixel, okay, the domain for your URL, the one that is displaying your advertising, it will need to start with www.google.com. com and then slash whatever, right? It could be pixel. You'll pick the URL based on your keywords, and in this case, the brand slash the product, right? So again, okay, pick a URL in a sense that it's going to make people more likely to click on it because it reflects what you think their intent is with the search. And of course, this is going to be built around the keywords. Okay, good. And then the last element of the search, right, other than the copy of the search, the URL, it's going to be the landing pages. Okay, and I cannot emphasize enough how absolutely essential it is for you to create a landing page that is optimized for your campaign. Okay, what does that mean? Number one, okay, it needs to address exactly what the customer expects and is looking for. Okay, it needs to be clear, it needs to be attractive, right? But it needs to be attractive meaning, you know, look professional. But it needs to be very clear what it is that that page is for. Don't have them go to your main page. Okay, that is the waste of customers' time. Okay, take them directly to where they can do the action that you're trying to achieve. Okay, whether it's buy a product, sign up for a newsletter, right? Whatever it is that you're trying to achieve with this campaign, the landing page should be specifically built for that. Okay, it's going to be absolutely essential because Google is going to include the quality of the content in the landing page and also how quickly it loads, its usability, whether it's mobile enabled or not, all the technical aspects. But it's going to use all this to determine, to a large degree, although it's not the only part, whether your ad will be shown or not. So spending time generating high quality landing pages, absolutely essential. And they need to be clear, concise, and know exactly, the customer should know exactly what it is that they need to do so that you can convert your ad. Okay. So let's talk about the last aspect. It's a little bit more technical in terms of what can you do with the ad in terms of the components and how you build it. This idea of ad extensions. This is essentially additional information that you can add to the search, or you can actually provide that information to Google, and Google will decide to add it or not based on a series of algorithms, right? That is going to provide potentially more information to the customer to make a better and more informed decision in where to click. Okay, so here you have an example of an ad. You can see it's an ad because it starts with the ad, right? That has the typical ad copy, right, which will have a link, okay, associated with a headline, and then it has some copy, right? So you can see the three elements that we were discussing about the ad copy are right here. But then there is some extra stuff over here that we have not discussed. Okay, in this case, those are site link extensions. There are different types of extensions. You can put your telephone number, you can give location information. There is a whole host of ad extensions that you can add. And then Google will choose based on things like the query, right? The search terms that the customer uses. And Google will decide which one or which ones of these ad extensions it will use, if any. Okay, again, based on what it thinks is going to be the most relevant information, the advertising basically that will make most likely for the customer to click in there, the visitor, the person doing the Google search, right? Now, as you can see, the moment that you add this additional set of elements to the original advertising, what this does is it makes the advertising, in this case, which is rather dramatic, I picked it on purpose, it's not always this much, right? But in this case, it makes your advertising literally almost, no, actually, not almost, twice as big. Let me see, I think, yeah. You can see it here without the link, and before with the link, it was twice as big, right? So this ad extension, what it does is it makes the advertising larger, and because the advertising is larger, there's plenty of research that shows that people are more likely to click on the ad because it takes more real estate, right? So if people are scrolling, especially on the phone, right, you're gonna click on the first ad and you didn't even get to see the second one maybe because your ad is so big, especially if you're on a small screen, right? So the bigger the ad and the more relevant the information it has, right, the more likely people are to click on it. Google claims, and I'm sure they have some good data to back it up, that if you add ad extensions and your ads are on average up to 15% more likely to be clicked on, which you should actually take the time to do this, especially if it's information that you already have. Now, not all ads are shown to everybody. We're going to talk about the process and how those ads are chosen, but Google gives you some flexibility in how you can target different queries, right? And queries is what people type in the Google search box, right? So Google is going to give you some flexibility in how you're trying to build your ads around the search terms, right? The keywords. So you can just use a broad match, which is basically if you do not provide any specific matching type. And then what Google is going to do is it's going to use the algorithm that it has such that any search example that they think it's going to match in any way to the keywords that you have chosen, it's going to use that. So this is the broadest. So if you're interested in just having maximal chances of having your advertising being chosen, this is probably the way to go. Now, the downside to this is many searches then are going to qualify for you. And because of that, typically, even though the number of times that your ad will be seen, the number of impressions essentially, it's going to go up. What's going to happen is the relevancy, because many more searches are going to be qualified basically for your ads. And typically, your click-through rate is going to come down. So what you're doing is you're increasing reach, but you are actually, to a degree, lowering the chances that people will click on your ad. Okay, so maybe in total you have more clicks, but it's going to come at a cost. So oftentimes I would suggest that you start using some other more focused searches, right? You can do phrase matching, which is by using quotation marks, right? So what that's going to do is make sure that the searches that qualify for your ads are basically very similar, at least up to what will be a phrase relative to your keywords. Okay. And then finally, the most narrow search and the more specific is exact match, where you use these brackets for your keywords. Now you can use mix and match these. You can actually have the same keywords with all three of them and then compare across them. Actually, if you get enough data by running sufficiently long the campaign and with a large enough budget, you can just compare across these and look at click-through rates, for example, and you will see that typically what I just described happens. In my experience, you probably want to use one of these two. The narrower one, I think, the better, especially early on if you have picked your keywords right. Yeah. Finally, not only you can do inclusion, these three are for inclusion, but you can actually have a negative match, which means, let's say, for example, that in the services that I offer I'm a dietitian, right? And if you're trying to lose weight, I can help you because I can tell you what you should be eating and shouldn't be eating and maybe give you some meal plans, etc. And in that case, if somebody's doing a search about health and losing weight, you might think, well, that's the type of keywords that maybe I'm interested in. but maybe they also use the word exercise. And given that my expertise has nothing to do with, how can you do exercise to actually lose weight, then maybe what I want to do is I want to have a negative match for exercise or for gym or for a number of sport related searches, because at the end of the day, I don't expect to convert in most of those, right? So you can actually use a negative match as well. And Google is going to give you an option to target in a few other ways, right? Like things like location. For example, if you have a restaurant, this is something that is very important, right? Because people are not going to be typically flying to your city so they can go to your restaurant. I mean, that's not the common clientele that most people have, right? So narrowing your searches, not only by keyword, which is obviously what you're trying to do, but also by some of the other aspects that Google enable you to do, it's particularly useful. One of them is behavior. So for example, Google gives you the opportunity of especially targeting people that have already been of your website. Now, this will require you to link your advertising account with Google Analytics, but this is definitely something that you should consider doing if you're already a somewhat established brand that has customers and you're trying to basically remarketing to the ones that have already been to your site in the past. Now, how do we go about winning that spot at the top? Because that's essentially what you're trying to do for people that are using a search that is similar to the keywords that you're using in the ad copy, landing page, etc. And well, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to bid for those spots, right? It's prime real estate, and you need to pay for it, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to put in a maximum bid of how much you're willing to pay for having your ad shown, okay? And you need to understand that this is going to determine to a large degree how successful the ad campaign is. On the other hand, if you put in a bid that is too high, what's going to happen is, yes, you're going to get a lot of impressions from the ad, but maybe you pay so much that you are hurting your profitability. So you have this thing where you need to bid an amount that is reasonable, right? Because otherwise your profits are going to tank. On the other hand, it needs to be as high as possible so that you can get that prime real estate. Now, typically, although there is a wide variance, it depends really on your business and the conversion ratios. But typically, having a bid for $1, $2, $3, it's pretty typical. If you have no idea what to do, a good starting place, if you have a long enough keyword, which I've already suggested, is that you start around $1. And then you can modify it from there. See if you're getting enough ads to run, or it's such a competitive space that you need to increase the bid. But you need to start somewhere, right? Now, the way the bidding process works is not just the bid you put that matters. It's a combination of the bid and the quality of your ads, okay? Why? Because Google doesn't only care about you paying for the money. Google wants, because this is their brand, Google wants the advertising essentially that is going to show at the top to be of sufficient quality that people are likely to click on it. Because if they are not, then obviously Google is not showing relevant information for you, and then you might consider as a user switching to maybe other search engine, because if you systematically keep finding that the first 2 or 3 results are crappy, well, maybe you shouldn't go to Google, no? So this really influences the brand equity for Google, and because of that, it's in the best interest of Google not only to make money, which obviously they want, but also in the long term make money, and to do that, they need to put ads that are quality ads. And remember, quality here means that the person is likely to click on it, and if the ad doesn't have information that is relevant to the search query, people are not gonna click on it regardless of how much people are willing to pay for it, right? So it's in the best interest of Google to make sure that ad quality is paramount when it comes down to determining which ad comes to the top. Okay. So what impacts your ad quality? Well, there are a couple of things that are important. We don't have the specific algorithm, but this is what Google says in their website about what impacts ad quality. Number one, the most important aspect is the expected click-through rate. So what Google is going to do is, using all the data that they have on the user and on the content of the ad and the landing page, they are going to run a model that predicts how likely is somebody to click on that ad, right? And based on that score, they're going to assign an ad quality rating to your ad, okay? Based on that, and essentially the relevance of the ad, which is going to be part of that model, right? And remember, the ad is built based on the keywords, which are going to be matched as closely as possible to the query, right? And also the quality of the landing page, right? So essentially, they are going to be looking at your entire ad from beginning to end, input it into some sort of predictive model, and guess how likely is for the particular customer to click in here. Now, if you want to understand better how those predictive models work, you can try to learn about it, but it's basically machine learning. There's a lot of complicated algorithms that you could actually create, and it's basically a function of the data that you have. And because the data you have here is going to be textual data, right? It's a query, it's text, and your landing page is text, your headlines are text, everything is text. So what they are going to do is they're going to convert this text to some sort of vector space. And so if you want to look into this, you can, but it's highly technical. So I'm going to avoid this completely, plus Google doesn't disclose exactly what the model is. So we don't know exactly, but we do know that these three elements or ingredients are important. Okay. So if your ad quality score is low, and by the way, you can check this in Google Ads. You create your ad and it's going to rank, it's going to tell you from 1 to 10 what is the quality. If you're not hitting 9s and 10s, that means that you need to work in your ad copy and you need to work in your landing page, okay? Because that's what matters, okay? Good. And keep working on those until you get high scores, otherwise your advertising campaign is not going to work out, right? And then what Google does is it combines both of these information pieces. Your bid, the amount of money that you're willing to pay maximally, and the quality of your ad, and essentially it's going to multiply these two in rank order. Let me show you this for a minute. So this is what they are going to do. Your rank, meaning do you show up number 1, number 2, or number 3? Let's say that there are 4 companies, like in this case, that are interested in advertising for this keyword, right? Okay. And again, the more competition you have, the harder it is. This is why I suggested you have longer keywords, right? And so your ad rank, and ad rank will be 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. And the first 2, let's say, are the only 2 that are going to be displayed. The other 2 will not be, right? So ad rank is what's going to determine whether your advertising is actually going to be shown to somebody who did a query at Google. Okay. And now what's going to matter for this is 2 things. One is the bid that you put on. This is in dollars. What is the maximum amount of money you're willing to pay and for somebody to see your ad, right? That's 1. And 2, the quality score that I was alluding to in the previous slide, right? And this is going to range from 1 to 10. Okay. And your ad rank is basically the product of these 2. So even if your bid is low, if your quality score is really high, you will rank first. Okay. In this case, my rank, because I have the highest number, I am first. So I have the highest ad rank. Okay. And because of that, my result will be shown as an advertising, right? And hopefully that will take people to take a look at my landing page and then do whatever CTA I'm interested in. Now, how much do you pay for that? Well, traditionally what used to happen is use a formula like this to figure out exactly what Google was going to charge you for showing your ad, which was a function of what the next person in line had gotten, and where people are arranged, people meaning companies, are arranged by ad rank. On the other hand, Google changed this, I think it was 2021, right? And now, instead of using a price that was a function of the ad rank of the previous company, the lower company next to yours, right? So if I'm first of the second, if I'm third of the first, sorry, of the fourth, etc., etc., right? And instead of using this, now they have moved to be a function, your price, of the highest bidder. Okay, the person that, the company that gets the highest rank. Okay, but this is subject to change. The important part is these are the two elements that you really need to understand. Okay, your bid, this is obviously something that's 100% under your control, and the quality score, and this is more indirect, but it's a function of your ad copy and your landing page. So this is why it's super important that if you're not getting enough impressions, you can either increase your quality score, which you can see in Google Ads, or you can increase your bid, or you can do both. Now, finally, after you run your campaign, and by the way, especially early on, make sure that you have a sufficiently high budget for each of your campaigns, right? And I would say start with a minimum of $10 a day, and this is obviously going to be a function of your bid, right? If you bid $1 and you have a budget of $10 per day, right? That means that on average, and this is going to be on average, by the way, it's important for you to understand, it's going to be a monthly average. And on average, you're going to spend $10 per day. Now, what Google is going to be is, because Google has a lot of data, they might choose to spend a little bit more money on some days than others, because they think, based on their data, that your customers are going to be more likely to click on them maybe on a Monday versus a Friday. And this is really product and ad dependent, obviously. And you don't need to give any explanation. Google will do the optimization for you. And now, early on, it's always smart for you to have a large enough budget that enables you to get enough data, meaning enough impressions, that you can start optimizing and modifying things, because you're going to have maybe different ads within your each campaign, and that way you can tweak and see which ones are working better or which ones are not working so well, and maybe you need some help. Now, for you to do this, you're going to have to track your results. So you're going to have to somehow see how many people are converting from your ad, right? So if you're trying to sell a product, how many people are actually going and buying your product, or how many people are signing up for your newsletter, right? It depends on the goal you're trying to achieve, right? Now, there are two ways that you can do this with Google Ads. You can go directly in Google Ads, and you can actually do this. By providing information, Google Ads will embed some code and that will enable you to track website, apps, or even phone applications. And so even if you're a brick and mortar store or a company that is a fulfillment company, you can still track things that happen in the real world, not only on the online world. Okay, and this is enabled via the Google Ads platform. Okay, but also, and furthermore, and maybe depending on what you're doing, if you're doing something more than just Google, you might consider linking it to Google Analytics. Okay, both options are going to enable you to track your conversions, which is absolutely essential for you to optimize your advertising. And on the other hand, the results that you're going to have is slightly different. Okay, they both use similar technology where they give you these tracking tags that you're going to have to embed within the code of your website, okay, or your app. On the other hand, the way they go about providing credit for the ads is going to be a little bit different. Okay, so in the case of Google Ads, what you're going to do in terms of attribution, which is whether you get credit for the advertising or not that they actually saw. And Google, it's gonna do any click within a time period, typically 30 days, and give attribution. If they saw one of your ads within the last 30 days and they bought your product, let's say within 3 weeks, then your ad will get credit for that as a conversion. On the other hand, Google Analytics typically tracks the last click, right? So if you did an email campaign and you did a Google Ads campaign and somebody went from seeing your ad to later seeing your email, and then after clicking on the email, they actually bought the product, even though they saw the ad maybe a week ago, Google Analytics will not give credit for that as a conversion for your ad. They will give credit to the email, right? And there are different ways you can set this up. So it really depends what you're more interested in to do one way or the other. But either way, it's super important that you're tracking so that you can see how to optimize your ad campaign. Finally, let me quickly walk you through how you will go about doing all this from a process perspective, right? So how will you go about doing an advertising campaign for search advertising? The first place for you to start, like always, I think we have already alluded to this in some of the other topics that we have discussed. The first step is for you to have clear goals. What is that you're trying to achieve? Now, these goals could be brand, product, or even business related, right? I mean, depending on the unit of analysis that you're interested in. Again, these goals can be short-term, long-term. Whatever it is that you have going, start with that, okay? So these are the goals that you're trying to achieve. The goal could be to increase awareness. The goal could be to increase sales. The goal could be to gather a list of potential customers, right? There are different goals that you might be trying to achieve with the campaign, okay? Then the next step you're gonna have to do is come up with a solid list of keywords. Do some keyword research, okay? We already talked a little bit about how to do this when we talked about SEO. But basically use a tool. Google Ads has its own keyword search tool where you can just see what kind of keywords you can use. Okay, there are third-party apps that help you do this. When I say apps, applications both in a desktop and in a phone, but it's mostly on a desktop. I said desktop computer. Okay, I'm old school, I guess. And so spend some time picking the right keywords. Look how competitive the keywords are, and they will give you an estimate based on the volume of search and the amount of companies that are using them about how expensive it's going to be to get them, how competitive they are. Google will tell you this, and other applications will as well. Okay. Then after you have picked your keywords and make sure that they are specific enough, don't just pick single words for the most part, unless you have very good reason. And then you're going to have to build your campaign. And remember, when you're building your campaign, make sure you understand this idea of the ad structure, right? So you have an account, then from the account you might have multiple campaigns. These campaigns should be nested within the goals that you have decided. So for one goal, you might have 2 campaigns, for example. Okay. And then after that, you might have different ad groups that you're running. You can run multiple ads simultaneously and do some testing about which one is working better or not, so that you can do some optimization. Okay, and again, these ad groups will be run based on the keywords that you have chosen. Okay, then you're going to create the ads, and remember, to create the ads, what do you need? You need to create headlines. Okay, have multiple headlines. Don't just write one headline and be done. Okay, unless you're perfect, most people, I don't know how to pick the best headlines. So, of course, generate these headlines based on your keywords and modifications around the keywords. Write the headlines that you think your customers are most likely to click on, because that's what they're going to be doing, hopefully, right? Then write a solid description and URL, remember the URL around keywords, right? That is clearly describing what you're going to get there. It needs to be concise and to the point, right? Should maybe write the description around CTAs, right? If you want them to buy, then explain why buying there makes sense given the query that they have written. Okay. Okay. Consider adding ad extensions. That's going to provide further information for your customers and potentially make your advertising larger. And the larger it is, common sense tells you the more likely they are to click on it, because they are going to be less likely to look down, because remember, people are in a hurry. They're trying to just get done whatever they're trying to get done. So if you are the first result and you're big, you have a higher chance, and you have the right information, of course. And then finally, don't forget about the landing page, because at the end of the day, it's not about people seeing your ad and clicking your ad. It's actually for you to convert those into whatever CTA you're interested in. And the landing page should help you with that. Finally, or well, the next step, I shouldn't say finally, we have a couple more. And remember, the chances for your ad to be shown is going to be a function of the quality of the ad. And to improve that, you work on all the aspects that I just alluded to in the ad creation, plus, or maybe I should say, multiplied by the bid. So you might have to up your bid if you're not getting sufficient traction and not many ads are being shown, right? Also budget a reasonable amount. Like I said, start at least with $10. Maybe early on you want to go a little bit higher than that and see if you gather enough data so that you can tweak your campaigns, and then you can narrow down your budget. If you're a large enough company, all these budgets are per day on average, and you might be spending quite a lot more than $10 or $20, but I'm talking mostly to companies that are starting now, right? You need to start somewhere. Then remember that tracking is essential. You need to get good at learning what kind of variables that you look at to decide whether your campaign is being successful or not. Essential KPIs that you should consider: CRT, which is click-through rate, right? You want to know that people are actually clicking in your ad, not only seeing your ad. Okay, click-through rate is going to be a function on the number of clicks in your ad, and it's going to be divided by the number of impressions. So if a lot of people are seeing the ad, but very few people are clicking on it, your click-through rate is going to be low. Okay, you want this to be as high as possible, obviously. Okay, and to make it higher, again, your ad copy needs to be on point. Okay, remember, this is mostly a function of the ad copy. Okay, headlines, description, the URL, and ad extensions. That's what matters for click-through rate. And the next variable that you should consider is cost per click. Okay, and this is going to be a function of your ad quality, right? It's also going to be a function of your bid. Okay, so again, this is going to be basically summarizing all that. Then finally, you might consider building some custom metrics that will enable you to maybe make better financial decisions downstream, especially if you're comparing across brands and across different advertising options, not only search advertising. So some sort of return on investment metric that basically looks at how much are you spending and what are the results that you're getting out of it. You might have to quantify how much each person that actually signs up for your newsletter is worth for you. And based on that, come up with an ROI that is going to tell you what's working and what's not. Maybe compare this to some other options that we're going to discuss during the class. And then finally, what do you need to do once that you decide on your KPIs and you have your tracking in place? Well, you're going to have to monitor this data, try to find the weak spots and improve them, and try to optimize. That's what I have for you guys.